Well, what's sleep paralysis? What's astral projection? Like, the real question is, what are they stealing? And what is the greater truth that we're missing out on here? And so what we have with sleep paralysis is a being from another dimension or realm coming to a bedroom door at night. It is looking for an invitation. Okay, you're going to start to see the vampire analogies come out now. And when the bride says it's okay, whether that consent is actual consent, it's a consent via an open door through sin or something ancestral, whether it's fear, terror and fear can draw them, or sometimes not saying I do not consent in and of itself, or addressing it. Who are you? What do you want? Now you're communicating, right? Many different ways that you can actually invite them without saying, come on in, you know?
Well, hello and welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Club. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Ben.
And thank you for joining us yet again. So we have a fantastic show for you today, a great guest, and we're going to cover a very interesting topic that we've actually delved into with our wives on the show before. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go back and check that out. And I think this one was, where do we go when we sleep? So we're going to dive into some of what we got into in that show today, which is the night terrors and all that aspect with our special guest. But before we go there, and before I give her a full intro, just want to let you guys know that we would love to have you join us more often on the foil. So if you head over to our website, thetfhc.com, you can actually sign up for our newsletter. There'll be a box that pops up over there. You can fill that out, and we will make sure that you get added to our private Facebook page. You can find our public page over on Facebook as well. But we would love to have you be a part of the foil. You can also find out over there how to become a member of the show. So if you click on members, it'll actually take you to our landing page for Supercast, and you can sign up to be a member of the show. We would love to have you do that. There are 3 different membership levels for you to choose from. And obviously, as you work your way up the food chain, you get more and more perks. So we would highly recommend the HD Foilers plan to you, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to see and listen to some of our HD Foiler episodes. So that would be fantastic. You can also find out more about our guests over at the tfhc.com/guests. And you can click on that link there, and you will be able to find out about all of our guests that we have on the show. There will be links to their books and a bio, and also any web pages that they have. So we would really appreciate you checking that out as well. And without further ado, I will bring in our guest here. So this lovely lady is joining us for the first time today. We're super excited to have her. But it is Vicki Joy Anderson. So there she is down there in the bottom corner of your screen. So Vicki has been on many podcasts before. And so this is not a new game to her today, but it's just her first time being on our show. So we're very thankful to have her on, and really looking forward to a great conversation. We already had some good conversation before we hit record. This was a rare opportunity for us to actually talk to a guest before we actually hit record, because we didn't have 80 million gremlins today that we had to chase away from the tech perspective, which was awesome. So it was good to talk to her a little bit, get to know her a little bit. But Vicki, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So like I said, we'll start off today, since it's your first time on the show and we can get to know you a little bit. Just tell us how you got involved in our crazy world that we operate in, and what was your gateway drug for that jump?
Being born. This has been lifelong, whether I realized it at the time or not. So I basically immediately from the get-go I was born in 1972 with a rare at the time birth defect called hypertelorism. So I spent the first month of my life in the hospital, and I think a lot of the spiritual warfare for me started there. I'm obviously undergoing trauma. I'm being separated from my parents for a month with very few visits. I'm in an ICU. I'm surrounded by strangers, and I'm not bonding with my mom. And by 10 days old, I had my first surgeries, like serious exploratory brain surgery. And my mom, this will give you a clue as to her sense of humor. My mom would always say, at 10 days old, you had exploratory brain surgery and the doctors found nothing.
I thought that's maybe how that was going to go. I just want to stop right now and ask, are you sure that we don't have the same parents?
Who knows these days?
Yeah, the world is full of surprises, right? We'll have to dive into 23andMe or an ancestry to figure that out.
I was just going to say, well, that we'll be on the nightly news finding our long lost brother and sister here. So anyway, one of the things that is very key that you find in a lot, and now I'm not just talking about someone who had sleep paralysis one time after they watched a war movie or they smoked dope or something. I'm talking about people where it started like 2-3 years old. It was habitual. It was night after night, and it lasted for decades. Like targeted individuals, so to speak, and things like that. And so for those people, one of the key elements that almost always has to be present for that to work is trauma. And so when we think of trauma, we always think of, the big obvious ones. What are the obvious ones? Well, if you're not allowed to say it on YouTube anymore, it's probably one of those, right? But it doesn't have to be that severe. It could be surviving a car wreck or a divorce or the death of a parent. In my case, it was all this medical stuff and the upheaval of always being taken to the hospital and not knowing if I was going to get a needle and, all the anxiety that comes with that, and then going to school and getting teased and all that stuff. So for me, it truly did start from the gate. But then on top of all of that warfare that I was experiencing through that gave birth to anxiety and depression and a lot of social and relational trust kind of issues because of friends who weren't really friends. And it does a number on you too, because there are certain concentric circles of relationship where a person has to earn their way into those inner concentric circles. If you're an acquaintance or I just met you or you're a total stranger, you don't get the inner circle, all of my vulnerable heart, soul dreams and, all that stuff. And when you're going out to Walmart to like pick up toothpaste and strangers are stopping, what happened to your face? Like that's intensely personal information that's tied to a lot of hurt and fear. And so it was almost like in an attempt to kind of keep something for myself, I became like this fiercely private person with all of the dumb details that don't make any difference. And so I had a lot of really superficial friendships all growing up because I thought, well, since the most personal things I never wanted to share with you, I'm going to hide everything else from you because I have to have something that's mine, right? So it was very hard to get close to. And so I think what a lot of people don't realize with the sleep paralysis stuff is it's usually on top of trauma that's already there. And the narrative that's out there on the web, this is where it really does sleep paralysis sufferers a huge disservice. If you think that this is someone who just has a little bit of narcolepsy and occasionally they don't get a good night's sleep or they have a bad dream, that is the least of it. It affects every aspect of your waking life and all of the various attachments, the mental things that go along with it, and the anxiety, the depression, the way that your coping mechanisms for trauma and things like that. So one of the reasons why I decided to write about this topic is because there are so many nuances of a lifelong sufferer of this that are getting completely overlooked. So when you're gaslighting a targeted individual in this, and you're mocking them or you're making them sound cuckoo and or you're just relegating every single thing they've experienced to just a little REM glitch or a narcolepsy, you are ignoring major facets that are also required for their healing. There's relational and there are clinical and there are psychological and mental and spiritual, huge spiritual implications. People that have had this their whole life, there are nuances in how their religious worldview gets shaped and even in how they interpret scripture or are what they might think about the supernatural or the demon world, which is not real popular in church. It's not real popular church topics these days. So if you show up with this extremely complex, nuanced theological perspective on the demon world and the spirit realm in Ephesians 6:12 and the interaction between the demon world and the physical realm, and you're going to be branded a heretic or a Looney Tune or a New Ager, and it's very hard to kind of find that place to speak or to even find a healing, even amongst professionals and clinical people that are trying to help you, or pastors or counselors. And so it just adds another layer of perceived isolation to the person who's already dealing with the isolation because of the trauma and the coping mechanisms, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's a way more complicated topic than just, there's people out there that have these like high level 3D nightmares and, hey man, take some melatonin and don't eat pizza before you go to bed and chill out. There's so much more to it. So I was ushered into it immediately. Add to that the fact that I was raised in a Christian home. So from day one, I was getting the word into me. On top of the fact that all the way back to the beginning of my life, I can remember my dad was ahead of his time, and he was always aware of these conspiracy theories. He knew all about Roswell and the UFOs, and he knew about underground bases and government conspiracies. And pre-internet, where in the world my dad read about this stuff or found out about it is beyond me. I ask him all the time, like, where'd you find all this stuff? And he's never given me an adequate answer. So maybe there's something there I got to check out. I don't know.
He's keeping his sources tight to close to the vest.
Exactly.
Yeah. What a guy. He sounds like he's a smart guy.
Yeah. Well, that's just one of the added absolute blessings I got from God. Because when you deal with this kind of thing, there's not really many people you can talk to. And when you know some of the aspects of sleep paralysis, some of the aspects that in the past never got talked about, not the kind of stuff you go and talk to your dad about, right? But I can tell my dad anything. He doesn't bat an eyelash. He's not freaked out. He doesn't think I'm weird. He doesn't lay hands on me and try to like cast anything out of me. Like he believes me. He rushes to do his fatherly duty. He knows the authority that he has, and he has done so much hands-on stuff, even to help me in my victory over this, just by praying for me. And even at times in my life where I lived in a different state, and he would call me at night and pray over me and things. So I can't even tell you what a massive blessing / direct influence he has played into my being able to cope with this, try to understand it, and to overcome it.
Yeah. What does modern science say that this is?
So depending on who you're asking, the most common answers you're going to get today is it's a brain glitch that occurs during REM sleep. Nothing to see here. Don't worry about it. You'll get narcolepsy. You will hear sleep apnea, people will say. In the past, the classic case was schizophrenia. Though now, even though it doesn't exactly mean it yet, I see it evolving eventually. There's now a thing, a legitimate mental illness that's called clinical vampirism. And it has more to do with people who think they're a vampire. And so these are kind of the goth guys that, shop at Hot Topic and paint their nails black and think they like blood and all this stuff, right? So, but I think why that has been set into motion is so that eventually survivors of ritual abuse and SRA and MK Ultra and mind control programs and various military and voice to skull and sleep paralysis, that once they start saying, hey, I'm interacting with demons, or I'm interacting with sentient tech, or I'm interacting with occultists, and I'm being hauled into the astral at night and being forced to take part in covenants and rituals, or I'm being abused in some way, they've got this very convenient label just waiting there to evolve into, you're delusional. But now, instead of calling you delusional or schizophrenic, now you get this very modern, cool, clinical vampirism, that you get to run around and sound cool, like it's a cool thing to have. But so that's just kind of my guess on that. But it's you're possessed by the devil, you're delusional, you're a drug addict, you're schizophrenic, or you have a sleep disorder.
Mm-hmm. So basically pass it off every single way humanly possible other than what it probably really is.
Yeah. Yep. And I always make it very clear, absolutely, there are physiological aspects to this.
Mm-hmm.
We're physical beings. And so this experience is a experience that captures the heart, the soul, and the mind and the body. Like it's an all-encompassing sort of experience. And so absolutely there are physiological aspects to the way our brain is wired, and various chemicals and serotonin and melatonin and dopamine and the pineal gland and phases of sleep and REM. Absolutely, they are taking opportune advantage of our physiology. And there are probably things that would, in a sleep study, register on EKGs or register in the heartbeat. Absolutely, there's a physical aspect to this. I would never deny that. Is an aspect of it scientific and medical? Yes. But that doesn't mean that we have to say that even though I'm a spiritual being, for some odd reason, every time this happens, that spiritual side of me is completely locked into a prison cell and has no part in this experience. So that's the part that I think is sort of strange to me, is that I'm not saying this is 100% a spiritual or demonic thing, and 100% of the times it's a demon coming to you through an open door because you did this or that. But what I am saying is, can we not at least be intellectually honest enough to admit that we as spiritual beings, or if you like the word, metaphysical, or like if you want to pick your own term, but the fact is there are aspects of our brain and our brain chemistry and emotions. Like when you talk about the science of falling in love, for example, it kind of like nailing wind to the wall, right? Like you're trying to scientifically explain, okay, I understand that dopamine is squirting out and everything like that, but you can't explain to me why I can look at 10,000 people and not feel a certain way. And then I look at one person and this reaction happens. And so I don't understand why we can't understand that there's anomalies to the human psyche and emotions, like falling in love. Then when you have something that historically, religiously, culturally, and theologically has always been a part of the discussion, the dreams, dream interpretation, all of this kind of stuff. And it's not just the book of Daniel in the Bible that talks about dream interpretations. Even in the Victorian eras and in 17th and 18th centuries, they would people would sleep in sleep cycles. They called it segmented sleep. There's actually a bunch of names for it. They would actually come home from work, eat a little bit of dinner, fall asleep for 4 hours. They would wake up for 3 or 4 hours, and then they'd go back to bed and sleep another 4 hours. And there's all sorts of explanations online as to why they did this. But what I find is interesting is the block of time, the watch of the night that they decided to get back up was the witching hours. It was between 12 and 3. Why did they not want to be asleep during those hours? What were they doing? And in some articles, it'll even tell you that the religious people were up evaluating their dreams and praying for protection against spirits. So that was an entire cultural phenomenon. It was only with the dawning of electric lights and people staying up gaming till 3 a.m. that we get into different sleep patterns. But historically, people slept differently. And you can go into and chalk it off to, well, that was evolution. They had to wake up in a moment's notice in case a bear was coming, or I get it. But the fact is, even if you go outside of the context of Christianity or the Bible, historically and culturally, you will find from the dawning of time, people talking about dreams, dream interpretation, sleep paralysis. They might have called it different names, but it was always in man's understanding, and it was always something fascinating. If you do a deep dive study on biblical demonology and you go back into like the anthropological sort of books that were written in the 1800s on it that studied all the cultures of the world and how they viewed demons, a lot of the demon activity was under the guise of dreams, astral projection, altered states of consciousness, sleep paralysis. Again, they didn't necessarily use those same terms, but we have known ever since after Genesis 6, when these beings either got relegated to the abyss or into a disembodied state, they had to change their method. They could no longer come down in the flesh and interact with us. So they had to come up with other ways to continue with their mission and their agendas. And so coming to us in altered states of consciousness when they know we are physiologically vulnerable, to say that the veil is thin at certain times and that they are still attempting and desirous to communicate with us, and they are still desirous to carry on their agenda to share the mysteries of heaven, which we're forbidden to share with man. To say that after Genesis 6, the entire demon world just decided like, oh, we lost, we give up. If we knew how relentless they were in their pursuit, they didn't give up that agenda. They just had to regroup.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things we got into when we were talking with our wives, because they have obviously both had experiences, not frequent experiences, both have had experiences. One of the things that, and I've had some strange experiences, not so much to the night terror front, but in that dream state where you're not quite awake and you're not quite asleep. I have experienced kind of a heightened state of awareness of nefarious things around me. And it seems like we kind of transcend during that dream state. And again, I get your take on this from the physiological aspect of what happens, where we do have a vulnerability and we are in another place almost than the physical realm because we're spiritual beings, right? And we're obviously clearly at rest, because if someone was just to sit in a chair for 8 hours, that's going to be really uncomfortably weird, right? But we can do that in the dream, in the sleep world, and we wake up and it's like, wow, I can't believe it's 8 hours later. And it's almost the same thing that people try to do when they take DMT or, more generic form of like ayahuasca that's been around forever and a day. So what exactly is happening during that state from a physiological perspective that opens us up, so to speak?
Yeah. Yep. Interestingly, the proof text I've been able to find is from Song of Solomon, of all places.
Wow.
And no one was more shocked than me when I found it. Because believe me, I haven't spent a lot of my Christian life in the book of Song of Solomon.
I'm pretty sure that would have been on the bottom of my list of places to look for this subject. You never know, right?
Well, I wasn't looking
like
for
a lot of sleep was happening in that book to be, but
I know, right? She was probably one of those obligatory reading through the Bible in a year where it's like, oh, here it comes.
Right.
Okay. But in Song of Solomon 5:2, it says, the bride was asleep, but her heart was awake. And then what happens? The bridegroom knocks at the bedroom door. So we have to think of this in terms of she's in the betrothal chamber, right? She's in the honeymoon suite.
Yeah.
That's what's going on there. And that was the key that unlocked everything for me, because it's not a secret to anyone who has studied this, experienced this, or watched enough horror movies that there is, I'm thinking specifically to vampire lore in particular, there is this dark, twisted eroticism to it typically. And so here we have the question. Well, first of all, let's ask the question. We know that the enemy doesn't have an original thought in his head. Everything is just a bastardization of something that he's stolen from the word of God or from the plan of God or the power of God. It's his imitation of that thing. And so we can't ask it, well, what's sleep paralysis? What's astral projection? Like, the real question is, what are they stealing?
Yeah.
And what is the greater truth that we're missing out on here? And so what we have with sleep paralysis is we have a being from another dimension or realm coming to a bedroom door at night. It is looking for an invitation. Okay, you're going to start to see the vampire analogies come out now. It's looking for an invitation, and when the bride says it's okay, whether that consent is an actual consent, it's a consent via an open door through sin or something ancestral, whether it's fear, terror and fear can draw them, or sometimes not saying I do not consent in and of itself, or addressing it. Who are you? What do you want? Now you're communicating with it, right? Many different ways that you can actually invite them without saying, come on in,
Yeah.
They step over the threshold into the bridal chamber, and then what happens next? Well, there's a consummation, but because this is evil, it's a violent, unloving, aggressive assault instead of a honeymoon scenario. So we have this idea that, well, okay, if there are things coming to my door at night while I'm in my sleep trying to pose as a bridegroom, but really isn't, that must mean that there is a real bridegroom who's trying to do that too. Like, is this a Red Riding Hood scenario?
Yeah.
Is grandma really a wolf? So what I have come to realize, and what sort of made sense to me through the whole thing, is sleep paralysis is a betrothal covenant, it is an attempt at a betrothal covenant. Jesus said he wants our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength, our body, right? If you seek me with your whole heart, you will find me, that sort of a thing. So what does the enemy want? The enemy wants to take from God what belongs to him. And so what's really fascinating is I started having exponential victories in overcoming sleep paralysis when I started praying betrothal type language. So instead of, oh God, please don't let me have sleep paralysis tonight, that kind of thing, I started praying. First of all, I would pray more offensively than defensively. You pray out of your authority instead of your fear. You pray with your sword instead of your shield. And I started praying things more like, Jesus, I do not consent to any contact or communication whatsoever tonight while I'm asleep. You are my bridegroom. I'm your bride. I'm your beloved. I'm your betrothed. If anyone attempts to even talk to me in my sleep, I pray that the full weight of your jealousy would fall on them. And let me tell you, these things don't bug me anymore at all. Now, you never know. These things, they do come periodically to try to reassert themselves, and they can try to catch flies with honey. They don't always just come with the vinegar. They can trick you. But you'll see these tropes in horror movies, and you're going to see certain elements that show up in these stories. You're going to see metaphorically or blatantly, you're going to see betrothal language. They're going to talk about covenants, and you're going to have humans saying, I do, and things like that. You're going to have goblets of wine. That's an emblem of a blood covenant. You're going to have boots coming over thresholds, close-ups of the shoe coming over the threshold. That's the threshold covenant. You're going to have the breaking of bread, or the Alice in Wonderland cake, the same sort of thing. That's a salt covenant. It's a sharing of salt. These are all covenants, okay? And you're going to see these in a lot of the vampire movies.
You're not going to believe this. Sorry to interrupt you, Vicky. I have to go here because
please do.
One of the things, Ben already knows. Ben already knows where I'm getting ready to go. It is amazing to me how many of these conversations we have, and God will do something. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking of this, that will line something up time-wise or experience-wise or whatever. Ben literally just got back from seeing the movie Nosferatu that just came out. So Ben, as you were sitting there and you were listening to this, fresh in your memory is this movie. So, and I'm sorry, Vicky, I just wanted to kind of go here because it fits in
No.
perfectly with what you're talking about. And the other thing before Ben, before you take off, I just want to say for those that are listening that are maybe not connecting vampirism with these entities, these disembodied spirits of ultimately the Nephilim. One of the reasons that the vampirism exists in culture and the drinking of blood is because when you go back and you read the literature, that is exactly what they were doing prior to the flood. They were consuming everything and they were literally drinking the blood of mankind. And one of the covenants coming out of the flood was to not drink blood. And there's things in the Bible that if you go do some research, you'll find that that is an absolute no-no from God. Do not consume blood, and whether that's obviously blood of each other or blood from an animal. So that's where the whole vampirism thing comes from. Now, Ben, Nosferatu, how does that? You were nodding a lot, so I'll just let you go.
Oh, well, it was just like, you're right. You're spot on. And I don't know if you've seen that movie yet.
I know.
There was like, we looked at it differently than the other people in the theater because it was black and white, good versus evil. You need to make the decision for Christ. If not, bad things are going to happen. And like Willem Dafoe's character, where he said, I'm kind of paraphrasing, like everything, you believe it in science, you no longer believe in spirituality or anything like that. And that's today. I know this was the time period, 1830s is when it was, but just the fact that they were probably thinking that time like that, that time as well. But it's the same thing. It's just rinse, wash, repeat all the time. Because, like you said, nothing. He doesn't do anything new. And there was the covenant for the bride. Then there was he made him like she had him come in. He wouldn't be able to come in at all. It couldn't be forced or anything. It was just. It's not my kind of thing. I do like good vampire movie because there's a lot of truth to it. But the weird thing was we were at a bookstore before we went to the movie, and I was just in the Bible section, and I just flipped through Genesis 6, and it said, I looked down, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also after that. And I was just like, never really thought about that. And I'm like, wait a second. That means they've always been here.
No, they didn't go anywhere.
They didn't go anywhere. It wasn't anything new, but it was just like kind of, and then watching that movie just refreshed my thoughts. And then we talked about it and rehashed it, Saturday night on the way home and Sunday morning. And it was just if you don't know, you need to know. You need to figure out your enemy. You need to know what they're doing. And like I said, we were the only ones in the theater that probably understood any of it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I did see it, and I've seen the 1922 as well. And I have studied biblical demonology, and as a lit major, so I have read a lot about even the filmmakers of the original 1922. They were card carrying, out of the closet occultists. They knew exactly what they were writing about it. They heavily borrowed off of Bram Stoker's Dracula to the point where Stoker's estate sued the filmmakers for copyright infringement and won. And all copies of the film were ordered to be destroyed, which we now know obviously didn't happen because we still have copies of the 1922 silent film. But the movie is very dark, you guys. It's not just like, oh, it's a good scare, it's a good horror movie. It's extremely dark. And if you go to it with any sort of vulnerabilities or triggers or open doors, it's not family friendly. There were several scenes where I looked away. I couldn't even watch, and not because it was gory, but it was so distressing to me as a survivor of this. And even just hearing the audio was still disturbing to me. So I am not recommending this movie, but I will tell you, I could not believe how blatantly in your face they were telling you what this is. And I'll even go a step further. So we know, like, if you pay attention, like if you know about astral abduction, these are people that get pulled into the astral realm at night who don't want to go there. They're not looking to do that. They're not studying it. They're not adepts. They don't want to go there. And in fact, many people don't even know. They just think, oh, I had a nightmare, or that dream was weird. But if you know what to look for, you'll see this in movies. You'll see it in The Matrix. You'll see it in Wizard of Oz. You'll have a character fall asleep and then wake up. And what you don't realize is the character is in the astral realm now. And that's why you have to have these transition scenes where Neo has to keep going into the hotel, like the jump space, and go up the spiral staircase. Like every time there's a jump space. And Dorothy had to go fall asleep in a field full of opioids, right? She was there with all the poppy seeds, and then all of a sudden she's in an emerald city. And same with the Matrix. Every time he's there, it's green. It's this green tinted, astral plane. So I don't know if the filmmaker did this on purpose. I don't know how much they knew, but everyone knows, whether it's classic sleep paralysis, astral abduction, or it's the militarized version, which is remote viewing. Inception did a good job of this. When you have this, there's multiple dreams within a dream. You wake up and the horror just continues because you keep thinking you're dreaming that you're waking up.
Yeah.
So then the next level is even more terrifying, because at that point you're like, I'm no longer dreaming. And so it's very common with this sort of thing to have dreams within a dream. You'll note that before Thomas, the husband character, went up to the castle, he was in the city, and he went into the inn, and he fell asleep, and he had a bad dream, and then he woke up in the morning and left. I don't think he woke up. I think that he was in the inn. He had a bad dream. It went into the next level of sleep. And the reason I think this, I don't think there was an actual castle there that he went to. I think he was in the astral realm. And this is why I think that. Nosferatu had not been given the permission or the invitation yet to cross into the physical realm. So the metaphor of his crossing over from the astral realm into the physical realm was if he was moving to Vicksburg, right? And the reason why I think you can pick up on this, I think the filmmaker went out of his way numerous times to explain it. Thomas is walking up a mountain, and it turns into a pathway, and then it turns into a crossroads. What's the most common trope for meeting the devil at the crossroads, right? It's a liminal space. And he gets in a carriage, and I'm literally saying to myself, if he is in the astral realm or if he's in the underworld, the Cerberus has to show up at the gate, the three-headed dog. And right as I'm like looking for the Cerberus, 3 dogs come out to meet the carriage, which they can't do Cerberus. It's too obvious. People would pick up on it, and they don't want people to pick up on it. So here comes the 3 dogs. He gets into the castle. What's the first thing Nosferatu says to him when they get into the room? Do you remember? I got chills when he said it. Show me your covenant papers.
Yes, yes.
And I was like, you got to be kidding. You're not even attempting.
No.
You're not even using a metaphor anymore. He
surprised me.
literally puts a contract out and gave him the wine, gave him the bread, and you can look at that like, oh, it's communion.
Yeah,
it's a bastardization of communion, but it's all forms of agreement. You've signed the covenant, you've drank the blood, you've eaten it's a salt covenant, a blood covenant, it's a contract. And then this is a little, not 100%, but in the original, in the 1922, Nosferatu sees a little portrait of Ellen, the wife. And in this one, he sees the lock of hair. And even though she cut the lock of hair off the bottom, so there would not be any DNA in it, I also believe they were giving away the fact that in order to repeatedly abduct someone into the astral realm over and over and over again over the course of their life, you actually do have to have their DNA, whether that's through blood or something that has been taken out like from a hospital, or it's gotten, there is a DNA aspect of it. And that's why it's both physical and spiritual. You've got this spiritual contracting of the heart, whether that's intrigue or curiosity or thrill seeking. And then you've got this physical representation, in this case, the hair, even though there wouldn't have been DNA in the hair clip he had because it didn't come from the root. But I think they were at least trying to get all the tropes in there. So what happens right after he signs that contract? All of a sudden, Nosferatu can leave his castle, and now he's living in a house in the real world across the street from Ellen. And I think it was a transference of kingdoms and of realms. I don't think that he moved from Transylvania to Vicksburg. But this stuff is all embedded. And if you're not looking for it, or you don't know the symbols, you're not going to know. But that is the most accurate giving away of what a targeted individual who's getting cosmically assaulted in the astral realm. I wouldn't call Nosferatu a zombie. I wouldn't call him a vampire. I wouldn't even call him an incubus. He is a classic spirit spouse demon.
Yeah, it was like the parallels was crazy. And my wife, she was like, she goes, I think this is the best way to show somebody this is how evil is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, people need to watch this. She goes, it's not a lot of good things in there, but when it comes right down to it, it teaches you how to fight against the spiritual realm like that. I mean, she could have made the choice not to invite him back in at the end, but what was going to happen? It was all hell was breaking loose because of what was happening. And just like in Genesis, I mean, it's like a big Genesis 6 all over again. And that just little town. And I was like, this is crazy.
Isn't it amazing what happens when you snap those goggles on? Everything we watch, it's right in front of our faces. And everybody like you and I, Vicky, before you popped on, one of the things that we were talking about before we hit record and before you joined us before we hit record, was just how asleep, especially our brothers and sisters in Christ are to this stuff. Yeah. And it's in some ways, a lot of times not their fault because the church has deliberately removed, and I'm going to use a favorite of L.A. Marzulli, obfuscated the truth of Genesis 6. We talked about making a shirt that just says obfuscated, and it's going to say that over a UFO, and it's going to say L.A. Marzulli underneath. You tell LA we're going to do that. But yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? So it is, though. It's they use the movies and they use Hollywood to throw this right in our faces, and it's constantly you're being programmed to accept it, and that it's just storytelling, it's just a story, and we'll even throw the God aspect of it in with a twist so that you don't catch it because you don't have any of the understanding of what spiritual warfare really is. And our brothers and sisters in Christ are being indoctrinated into thinking that this is perfectly normal, let alone someone who doesn't know God, right? And it's terrifying, like how obvious. They don't hide anything hardly anymore. If they would have put the Cerberus in the movie, that people would have never said anything. But they're like, it's weird. 3-headed dog doesn't really fit with the theme of the movie, so we'll just put 3 dogs that run out. That makes more sense, right? That's probably why they did it.
We're a little dark anyway, so when he pricked his finger and started bleeding, we all started laughing.
I know. It's crazy. Well, and this is what's really scary. I'm talking in sweeping generalities here. There are a lot of people who have been getting abducted into the astral realm at night. When they wake up, they don't remember much, if anything. If they do remember something, they might think it's a nightmare. There's a lot that we can transfer from the UFO experience over the sleep paralysis experience, even though they're completely different agendas.
You're beating me to the punch here because that's where I was going to go with you next. So go ahead.
So with UFO experiencers, they'll talk about missing time. Well, you're not going to have missing time when you sleep. No one thinks it's weird when they wake up 5 hours later. You're not ever going to question missing time. Missing memories. They don't remember what happened. We wake up. How many of us don't remember my dream? I don't dream. And then third of all, we have screen memories, right? So you'll hear UFO abductees talking about how I was driving down the road and I saw a 4-foot owl. I saw a 4-foot, squirrel, like that kind of thing, right? And it's these screen memories, and there's screen memories in sleep paralysis too. I believe that a vast majority of the time when you're quote unquote awake in your bedroom, you are actually, it's a dream within a dream. You are still outside of the body because there's always a glitch in the bedroom. I'm not saying 100% of the time, every single person, but you will often find a glitch. You're going to find a window that isn't in your room, or a bedspread that's the wrong color, or a bookshelf that you don't own. There's going to be a glitch. And so you've got screen memories. And so what's going to happen is a lot of people will wake up. And this is the danger in how the evolution of the vampire lore is getting us into trouble. Way, way back, you go all the way back to like the Sumerians and all that. You're going to have these spirit spouse, incubus, horrible demonic creatures. And then it, Bram Stoker turns it into something else. Hollywood turned it into this romantic thing. Stephanie Meyer turned it into Edward Cullen, glittering, asking people to prom. This is where we've gotten now, where we're buying our children romance novels where the high school girls are falling in love with vampires and fallen angels and things like that. Right. So here's where it gets scary. And here's the one thing that I will say, that even though it was extremely triggering and dark and disturbing for me, it is at least the one thing Nosferatu got correct. When you wake up from one of these astral dreams and you don't have a memory, of the Nosferatu castle and the contract and the wedding ceremony or the ritual or, the consummation, like you don't remember any of that. If you do remember it, there might be a screen memory on top of that. So you see a handsome man, who's just very, alluring and you're attracted to. And so you wake up with this sense that that was bad and that was evil, but I'm also kind of curious about it because, we are all fallen, fleshy, carnal people, right? And so you wake up with all of your endorphins going and all of this fear. And then on top of it, it's this like erotic element. And if you're thinking it's Edward Cullen glittering and smiling, when wants to marry, want to take you to prom, you are gonna start embracing the gaps, the missing pieces of your memory. You're gonna fill in with something pleasurable, something beautiful, something romantic, and your fantasy is not ever going to truly understand that thing you're engaging with is actually a disgusting, smelly, maggot-infested, drooling, bad breath. Just, you know what I mean? These things are they're gross and ugly, and they have the ability to trick our minds and whatnot. And so this is where it gets very dangerous, and this is where the attachment can follow into the physical realm, is because people will carry these into their daily awake lives. And like I said at the beginning of the show, if you're someone who's undergone a lot of childhood trauma and there's already some sort of dysfunction, or there's anxiety, or there's depression, or there's isolation, or there's rejection, or you feel like I'm an outsider, no one understands me, nobody loves me, you are already in a extremely vulnerable position because nobody sees me, right? And that's why I try to tell people, this might seem like a weird connection to you guys, but I love that portion in scripture where Hagar goes out in the wilderness to die with their son. And, she was second fiddle in that house. Sarah was the queen of the castle. Her Isaac was getting precedent now over her son. And it says that Sarah was very unkind to her. Abraham probably didn't love her the same way he loved Sarah. Probably had kind of like a Leah situation going on there. And the way that God chose to reveal himself to Hagar, the unwanted, the unloved, was the God who sees, right? And when you have someone who's gone through trauma and they're isolated and they feel unloved and they feel like no one knows the real me, you bring them into a celestial realm and you tell them you're special. You are chosen. You have a gift. We need you. You're a star seed. You came from another dimension and you are going to help redeem the world. There's not too many.
You don't stand a chance.
They don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
And then when you come to them and offer them something superior and say, bow your knee to a God who will always rule over you. Who wants to
Yeah.
give up their own self-perceived godhood for submission to a throne? Like, no. So
Yeah.
we're really up against something here. We had better learn as individuals and as churches, as pastors, as seminaries. We had better relearn how to preach the gospel in a way where God is seen as the powerful, amazing, awesome, exciting, supernatural, mind-blowing God that he is. Because the God that we're preaching about, usually every Sunday, can't compete with the stuff that they're giving these kids in the astral realm. We've got to get all the aspects of the scripture back into the pulpits on Sunday. We've got to stop just stoically talking like little feel-good stuff about God's he's going to forgive your sins and we're going to go to heaven someday. Like, we've got to compete with what the enemy is offering.
They're beating our
And
pants off.
yeah, they are.
They are. They're kicking our butt. That's just the straight up truth.
And we got more stuff, but it's
Yeah.
been withheld from us.
Yeah.
And so we present it the way it was presented to us, which, hey, someday, if you're really lucky, instead of going to hell, you'll sit on a cloud with the harp. But no one wants that. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, we've substituted truth of biblical truth of spiritual warfare. That's a huge one that we've talked about, and obviously our show revolves around that mainly. But we've also sacrificed truth of speaking out against what's going on in the world, and we've rammed in place of both of those things how you can feel better about yourself. And a lot of self-love and self-care. And I'm not saying that stuff's not important, but when it's all we do and we just, pretend like all these other things that are going on around us all the time aren't happening, well, it's no wonder why we're in the state we're in as far as the church, and no wonder why we're getting our, brakes beat off. I mean, they're kicking our butt. I mean, like, if you were to put a mature Christian, right, that we would consider nowadays, up against a mature cultist, the cultists would eat their lunch. It wouldn't even be close, as far as the powers that they would tap into. It's sad. It's terrifying that that's where we are. But I don't know if I want to say one other thing too, a couple other things really quick. It's fun when you go back and you look at that Hagar passage there. We had a great conversation. I mean, a great one. That was one of our favorites that we've ever had, was with Doug Van Dorn about his book, Angel of the Lord. And when you go back and you read that, that's more than likely probably Jesus that was talking to her at the time, which we don't think of a lot of times in the Old Testament. So go back and read your Bibles. That's a fun one. The other thing that I want to tie into, I don't know if you can see this, Vicky, but over on the side, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, which is, I knew I was forgetting something. That's my shortcoming. But there's a live chat that's rolling through, and my wife is Adrian, and you were having some lights come on for her when she was having her sleep paralysis, because she mentioned, I know, the glitch, and we have a couple other people that are in there. So just throwing that out there for you. But I know we probably should have gotten over this first, but I just want to, and we've kind of covered it in pieces, but I just want to walk through this for clarity for anybody that, is maybe experiencing this. What does one of these events look like kind of from start to finish? We'll start there, and I have one other question kind of going with the UFO abduction, and because we just spoke to Karen, so I just want to talk to you about that too.
Oh yeah, Karen is a good friend.
Oh, I bet you guys have some sewing circles that are or some conversations together that may make a blind man blush, So.
That's right. In fact, Karen is the one that gave me my Dark Side of the Moon shirt.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That I'm wearing.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's awesome. So there you go, full circle. But yeah, what does this look like from start to finish?
Yeah. So obviously it's not a cut and dry formula for everybody.
Yeah,
Let me give you a standard. I'm going to give you a standard cliche baby boomer sleep paralysis experience. Okay. And obviously I'm not a baby boomer, but most baby boomer Gen Xers have this certain experience. It's starting to change. We can talk about that in a second, but the classic baby boomer sleep paralysis is you believe that you're waking up in your room. You can see your room, and you can't move. A lot of people experience like respiratory problems. They can't breathe, or they feel like they're being choked. Some people feel or even see something sitting on their chest. Some people will report seeing shadow people in the room with them. Maybe what are some of the cliche sleep paralysis characters? It can be alien grays, usually appearing at the end of the bed in threes. But it can be like, again, this is cultural. Like some people will see like gremlins or ghouls or banshees, and there's the classic horror movie tropes. But believe it or not, you guys, people report this. There's a rocking chair in the corner with an elderly cackling woman in it. It can be like the what is it like the is it The Shining or The Omen or both, where you've got the girls at the end of the hall,
The Shining, yeah.
Yeah. And then the dark mists in the corner of the ceiling, blacker than black silhouettes, so they don't actually see a being, but they see a part of the room that's actually blacker, that's like absorbing all the light. And then you've got people that don't see anything, but they absolutely feel the presence of evil, and they even can like know where it is in the room, or how many there are, or if it has a male or a female energy. You've got the classic incubus, succubus thing. That's the classic. That's what you're going to hear the most. Now that can be followed. Some people, it can escalate to physical aggression. People talk about getting hit, slapped, things put into their nose, mouth, or ears. People in the bed, movement in the bed, feeling something, being pulled out of the bed, dragged places. Some people, in extreme cases, this is usually ritual abuse cases, they will wake up with the physical evidence of those assaults. This can go into out of body. This can go into astral. It can escalate. There's no end to the horrors that this can escalate to, depending on how deep in it you are. So that's the classic sleep paralysis. Now, what's interesting is these entities have to adapt to the culture. And so we know that there's a vast shift now. If you're talking about Gen Alpha, Gen Z, vast difference between Gen X and baby boomers by way of life experience. Like, we're still connected to the old world where the phones hung on the wall to cords and we didn't have the internet. And like, we remember grandma and grandpa's times. We remember when our cars didn't have power windows and we didn't have air conditioning in the cars. And like, we remember this stuff because it was part of our childhood. And so these entities have to adapt with the culture. And so one of sort of the hilarious kind of cultural stereotypes with the Gen Xers is that, and the baby boomers as well, is you don't like it, who cares? Shut up. Children are up to be seen and not heard, right?
Right.
You didn't complain. You didn't like, if you didn't want to go to school, you went anyway. If you didn't like your dinner, you ate it anyway. If you didn't, you got put to bed. And so we were a generation that were taught how to shove everything under the rug. Trauma, heartache, emotions, hurt. Like, you just put on your poker face and you soldiered through it. And it doesn't matter if you're in physical, mental, spiritual pain, you just smile and nod. And so these entities could get away with scaring us and appearing ugly and being mean to us because they knew we were never going to say a word. Now we have a generation of people that are so free with their emotions that they will get online and post online for everyone to see, things that in our generation we wouldn't want anyone to find out about. You know what I mean? Like, we would keep everything so close to the vest. So if you go scaring the royal crap out of these young kids these days, they're not going to stand for it. They're not going to sit and take it. They're going to be online in 2 seconds saying, guess what I saw? And then there's going to be thousands of other people. I've seen that too. I've seen that too. Well, they're not going to give themselves away like that. So they've had to adapt, and they are adapting. And this is why the lucid dreaming, astral abduction stuff is getting turned from an assault into a wooing, right? And so now we've got, instead of lucid dreaming, we've got reality shifting or shifting. We've got people that are like, oh, the astral realm is fun and exciting. I can be Harry Potter, I can be Thor, I could, you can pick whatever movie star or celebrity universe you want. And you just go and explore, and act like Indiana Jones all night or whatever. And then now they still wake up with the same energy drain that the old school people had, but it's one of those it's a side effect. It's the hangover, so to speak, right? But it's worth it because all the power I feel and the invincibility I feel. So they're getting a different experience. The younger generation is being drawn in with the honey instead of the vinegar. You're like a god up here. And so they're like, oh, well, this is awesome, right? So the classic being held down in your bed while the shadow man, that stuff is kind of going away. It's sort of on its way out. It still happens. It still happens to the older generations. It can happen to the people in younger generations too. There's nothing cut and dry 100%, but I am starting to get more and more younger people contacting me, and their experiences are absolutely beyond anything I've ever heard. And what we're getting into now, we talked about this earlier, the altered state of consciousness was the key. That's the doorway. That's the liminal space. So whether you're going in and out of sleep phases, where you're briefly in altered states of consciousness as you fall asleep and you wake up, or it's drugs, or it's ayahuasca, or it's, anything that someone does to put themselves into an altered state. We are now getting to a point where some people, depending on how much they're exposed to, are in various altered states of consciousness when they're awake. And this is a combination of psychotropic medication coupled with THC, coupled with stress, anxiety, depression, coupled with earbuds in my ear that have binaural beats and various things playing in the background, interacting with 5G, interacting with gluten, by the way, you guys. Okay, I know I sound like a creep, weird person here. I got to put on my tinfoil hat, right? Gluten, when it goes into the system, it turns into gluteomorphine. The body processes gluten as morphine. And morphine is the cousin to heroin, which is a hallucinogenic. So if you are stuffing your face with genetically modified high gluten food all day, you're sneaking the little THC gummies at night your mom doesn't know anything about, and you're on psychotropic medication during the day, and you've got your little earbuds in with your trance music that's all the rage now, and you've got the little binaural beats in there that you don't even know about, and you're listening to all of these meditation videos at night as you're falling asleep, and you're going to bed thinking like, I wish I was this, I wish you're fantasizing all this stuff, and it's interacting with all the 5G. You are in a state at this point.
Yeah, man, you've been primed.
The veil is open, man. You don't have to be asleep anymore. And so
wow.
Now we got kids who tell me the whole sleep paralysis story. Sleep paralysis isn't even going to be a valid phrase anymore because these kids aren't asleep. They're at their desk doing their homework. They're seeing the things manifest in their room.
Man, we're getting close to the end.
I hope so, man.
I know it's getting bad. I'm like, and you can tell, like, we have this conversation all the time where you can just see the hockey stick of things that are happening. And it's like, we don't have much time left before it's going to get so bad as it was in the days of Noah. Right. Yeah. But we have a few questions over here. One question was from Royal Deluxe. And I think, she or he maybe said that they knew you from a conversation that you had with Top and Raven of NDS. I don't know if that makes sense to you. But I think, Royal, you joined us after we talked about this, but the person was asking what they could do to keep this from happening. And Vicky, just to paraphrase, and if I'm wrong, she can correct me. She said, really, it's being more offensive in your prayers before you go to bed, of not defensive of like, God, protect me tonight, but just being declarative and saying, hey, God, I am not allowing anything to touch me. I do not give it permission. I do not allow I want you to be jealous and stand in the way and protect me. And I am not giving permission for anything to happen. And she said the minute she started doing that, things went much better for her. Yeah. And then let's see. Sherry asks here at the bottom, Vicky, what is your opinion on sleepwalking? Is it a paranormal or is it just normal freaky sleep? That's an interesting one too.
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because there actually is a difference between sleep paralysis and night terrors. And a lot of people think they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. Night terrors, I'm talking in sweeping generalizations here, guys. There's always outliers that fall outside of the norm. But the norm for sleepwalking is, or for night terrors rather, is it typically happens only in childhood. Once a kid hits puberty or adulthood, they don't tend to have night terrors anymore. Though I have talked to a few people that have, so it does happen. It's more predominant in boys for some reason. And here are two anomalies specific to night terrors that follow us into the physical realm. Kids with night terrors tend to have frequent nosebleeds during the day, and they sleepwalk. And it's very interesting. Sleepwalking is often, again, let's go back to Nosferatu. It's a trope in these horror movies. Whenever she was dealing with Nosferatu, she wasn't just waking up from a nightmare. She was still asleep and she was sleepwalking, right? So they're giving it away there. Now, does this mean from a physiological standpoint that every single time a person is sleepwalking, they're having a night terror or they're interacting with demons?
Yeah.
I will tell you that historically, if you read old religious, like anthropological, biblical demonology books, people were very leery of sleepwalkers because they always made that assumption that that is what's going on, you know. But are there sleep disturbances? Are there cases of PTSD where people are acting out, you know, traumatic events from the war and things like that? Yes, obviously. So I do think that it can fall outside of the realm of the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have night terrors, if you have nosebleeds and you sleepwalk, like you've got several of these things all in tandem, then I would take a closer look and be more prayerfully mindful whether or not that sleepwalking is attached to the night terrors. Yeah, because with sleep paralysis, it's the opposite. You're pinned to your bed. You can't move. You're not going anywhere, right? And the reason you're not going anywhere, guys, is because you're not there. You're in the astral. And I have a really hard time getting people to understand that, because they're like, no, I know I was awake. And I understand why people want to argue with that, because it's very terrifying to say, you mean this is even scarier than I thought? But for the most part, usually when you have sleep paralysis, if you really think about it, guys, this is the question to ask. For me, I would be having a dream. So I know I'm asleep because you dream in an REM state. So I would be having a dream, and all of a sudden the dream would go dark. All the people I'm talking to would disappear, and I would hear the vibrations in my ears, which is the sound of the soul tearing. It's the separation. It's the out of body starting to happen. A terror would fill me, and then I'd wake up with sleep paralysis. And according to Jim Wilhelmsen, who wrote Beyond Science Fiction, this was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I think Alberino talks about it as well. I wasn't willing to give it any credence either when I first heard it, because it terrified me. I didn't want to come to grips with it. But what they were saying is it starts in the dream. And the sleep paralysis, when you wake up, there's portions of that dream you don't remember. And this is where a lot of sleep paralysis people get fooled. There's an MO with people that have lifelong sleep paralysis. They tend to be, you know, like we talked about the trauma, they tend to be very creative types. They're musicians, or they're artists, or they're writers or poets. They tend to have a lot of empathy, especially for like compassion on animals and people who are weak or hurt. They are usually extremely intelligent, and they're introverted. They can spend hours and hours and hours studying or contemplating and things like that. So the thing about most sleep paralysis incidences is you'll wake up and you will remember what you saw, who you talked to, what they looked like, the mole on their chin, what they said their name was, what you ate and drank, what their breath smelled like, how you felt, the sound effects. When you have that much confidence in your recall and your own intellect, if someone tells you there's a 10-minute portion of that dream you don't remember, and you're never going to remember, they'll be like, no, because there's too much confidence in their recall and their intellect. And so what happens is, this is my own theory, guys. It's just a theory. When we wake up, we are in a full on adrenaline fight or flight response. Our body, here's where the physiology comes in. Our body is trying everything in its power to tell us that something very traumatic just happened. Okay. You got pulled out of your body. You were interacting with these entities. There may have been some sort of covenant or ritual going on. You might have agreed to something. You don't even remember it. So your body is in a heightened state of awareness. Your heart is pounding. You are sweating. You are in a supine position on your back in some sort of defensive pose. You, all the saliva in your mouth is dried up. Your neck is back and your mouth is wide open, like you've been crying out. Your body is doing everything it can to say, I was just in a heightened sense of adrenaline. So because these entities want, at least in the past, they wanted to be covert because they didn't want their mission spoiled. They didn't want people asking too many questions or figuring it out or talking to each other. I think that the shadow people that you see in your room, when you wake up in your room and you think you can't move and you see the shadow person or the red glowing eyes or whatever, I think that's the diversion. Your brain latches onto that and goes, oh, no wonder I'm scared. There's a demon in my room. His red eyes are glowing at me. He just told me he's going to drag me to hell. So you never ask any questions beyond that because I'm in a state of terror. That totally explains why I'm in a state of terror. It's been resolved. So you're not going to go back and say like, well, how much of my dreams did I remember last night? How many dreams did I have? How long was I asleep? And there's things that you should be checking when you have dreams like this. Is there a massive energy drain? Do you have unexplained chronic fatigue for days? Do you have a heightened sense of anxiety during those days? Are you getting into like social and relational situations that don't normally happen, when you're not sleep deprived? Are you getting into more arguments? Are you on edge? Are you all of a sudden now staying up till 3, 4 in the morning because you're scared to go to sleep? Are health issues starting to form? Like there are aspects of being in the astral where you will come back drained. I'll give you a little cinematic thing that they do a lot, and this ties directly into the night terrors as well. You'll notice in Stranger Things, every time Elle is asked to go into the tank in remote view, which is, requires demonic intervention, requires astral travel, she always comes back drained with a nosebleed. Right? That they're telling you something there. When you are in these realms at night, you're not sleeping. Well, one thing that you can do if you want, in fact, if anyone does this, I would love to hear your results. For years, I slept with a Fitbit on before Google bought it out or somebody bought it out. But for years, I would sleep with my Fitbit. And they say that the combined number of hours that you're in REM and deep sleep, that's the restorative restful sleep. So you want a really high number of hours of REM and deep sleep combined, right? And when you have chronic fatigue and you're staying up all night and you're getting dragged into the astral, you sleep a lot because you're just tired throughout the day. So I would on average sleep like 8 to 11 hours because I had such bad chronic fatigue. And I would check my Fitbit stats the next day. And I'm talking about a period of about 12 years here, you guys. I'm not talking about like I tried this twice. Over the course of 12 years, I would on average combined REM and deep sleep get 45 to an hour and 20 minutes combined every night out of 8 to 11 hours of sleep. And that was the norm for me forever. And I don't have a Fitbit or anything like that anymore, but ironically, and this is why I'm kind of glad it came up because I didn't think it would, after I saw Nosferatu and I saw with my eyes, it filled in the gaps. This is what's been happening to me my whole life that I don't have the memories of. I don't have the clear memories of, but I have the after effects and the results in the physical realm that would line up with where a person's mental state would be if this happened to them, right? And that was like a defining moment for me, even though I would not recommend that movie to any.
Right.
Is so dark. But I came home and I had to take a literal shower to get the filth off of me, you guys. It was like, and I was just praying, and the Spirit of God came over me, and I just said, I am done with this. I'm a child of God. I am done with this.
Yeah.
Chasing my tail, giving attention to these stupid things. I am done. And I prayed things. I don't even remember all of what I prayed. And that night, I found an old watch of mine. It wasn't a Fitbit, but I found this old like aerobic trackers thing or whatever. And I put it on. And so this was not like 9 days ago. I saw it not yesterday, but the Sunday before. I have never slept like I have slept in the last 8 or 9 days in my life.
Amen.
I have had dreams that instead of geo-hopping all over the world with all these people and all these crowds and all these people I don't know, and everything that I'm doing in the dreams getting sabotaged, am I being alone, and I'm calling out for people to help me, and either no one comes or they come and they just hurt me, and like this exhausting cycle of just seeing change after seeing change after seeing change, and everyone's against me. And every night for the last 8 days, I've had 3 or 4 dreams. They're spaced out. When I wake up, I remember them. And every dream, I'm in a quiet place with 2 or 3 people who I know in real life. One night, I was literally in a room where my friends were reading the Bible out loud to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had another dream where I was writing a hymn or a piece of poetry to God, and when I woke up, I remembered it, and I was able to like write it. So, a Song of Solomon 5:2. Finally,
Yeah.
the bridegroom's coming at night. It's the real one. So this little tracker I've been, wearing for the last 8 days out of curiosity, I've slept maybe 6 to 7 hours a night instead of the customary 8 to 11.
Yeah, but you're getting better sleep.
4 hours REM and deep sleep, 4 of it out of the 6 or 7. So this stuff is real, guys, and I think some of it's measurable. Some of it is physiological. It isn't all just this magical, demonic, new age, witchcrafty, you dabbled with the Ouija board and smoked pot. So now, God's mad at you. And, and so another thing I would say to the people, just by way of like, how do I get rid of this? If they're coming to you night after night after night, they have some legal right or some legal loophole that's giving them the permission to do that. And it might not be something you did. Everyone wants to jump to the conclusion that you sinned and you opened a door. Yeah, that's part of it. But it can be something that happened in your household when you were a child. If you're in a household and you're under someone's authority, like you've got a mom or a dad there, or sorry, everybody, if you're married, I know that's not PC, but if you are living under an authority figure, if they bring something in, it trickles down to the whole family. It could be something ancestral. You've got family members who are in lodges or secret societies who pledged family members over. So really do the prayer work. God, show me the open door. Show me the source of this. And it might be more than one thing. Show me the source so I can get rid of it. But I'll also tell you, because this goes back to what we were saying earlier about the dichotomy between us being repulsed by this stuff, but also having a sense of curiosity or eroticism. And so it's almost this like back and forth tug of war. It struck me so odd the other day. I was reading the part in scripture where Jesus said to the blind man, do you want to be healed? It's such an interesting question, but it's something, you guys, you'd be surprised how many phone calls I have with sleep paralysis sufferers that call me in distress because they want to get rid of this. But when I tell them, get rid of your erotic dream journal where you've written years and years and years worth of detailed dreams about this spirit spouse of yours, burn it. Burn your dream journal. And they will lash out at me. They will get defensive. They'll come out with excuses. So I say to anybody who wants to get rid of this, do you want to be healed? Because if you do, there's probably a lot of things that you're going to have to change or let go. There's certain things you're going to have to do every single night as your routine, and staying up till 4 a.m. watching YouTube and eating high sugary snacks is probably not going to be a good idea, because you're just feeding all the parasites. You're telling the parasites all night, I'm going to give you whatever you want, and then go to sleep and you expect to withhold, that's another aspect where the physical is attached to the spiritual. So you really have to ask yourself, no alcoholic, they want to give up the hangover. They don't want to give up the buzz, right? And it's the same thing with sleep paralysis, because it's the flesh. You want to give up all of the scary stuff and the paralyzation and the demon faces and all that, but you do want that thrill of feeling like you're chosen or special, and you want the thrill of the astral sex, or you want the thrill of the telling the stories around the campfire and all your friends went, whoa, cool, that happened to you. Like I will just ask you, do you want to be healed? Because if you do, it is going to require a pursuit of holiness like you have never pursued before. Instead of being exhausted from no sleep, you're going to be exhausted pursuing holiness.
It's so funny that you brought that up, because my wife and I literally this morning at the kitchen table, this morning, talked about that very verse and how I had started to zero in on the fact that I choosing to pray with people who are ill. I had started to feel like sometimes doing that, and this is going to sound controversial, I know, but sometimes doing that, I almost feel like it's really kind of almost pointless, because when you look at Christ's example, typically that's the first thing he asks: do you want to be healed? And in situations where you think of the woman with that suffering from chronic bleeding, and you think of this Roman centurion, the faith aspect was so powerful that Christ didn't even need to be involved there. Almost, it was like he was, but like not in the traditional sense with the others, right? Where there's this dialogue, this exchange. Like the woman just touched his garment, right? Yeah. And he said, I feel the power leave me, and he turns and has the exchange. So it's just funny how the Nosferatu thing and the conversation this morning. Sister, you are meant to be on the show today, I think. That's awesome stuff. So one more final thing, and then this might be opening a can of worms, but it'll probably be a good teaser for a future conversation that I have in my mind with you and Karen, maybe if you guys are game at some point at the same time. Yeah. You guys have had, it sounds like, in piecing this together, having talked to her and now having talked to you, it seems like you guys, it's almost like two different operations, but the same outcome. Is that pretty much the gist of it? It's the demonic realm obviously operating. The commonality is that, right? Everybody thinks extraterrestrials, and then maybe you were more pro on demons or whatever monsters on your end of the spectrum, but it's actually demons on both ends of the spectrum, right? That's the entity is the same. Entities are the same one way or the other, but you and her are just different. Your thing that you've experienced and her thing that she's experienced, or in the people that have experienced these, it's just a different way of going about the same outcome. Is that accurate?
Very close. It's the east and west wing of the same building, so to speak. So same corporation, same CEO, but the departments are compartmentalized. So UFO wing doesn't really 100% know what's going on in the other wing, and vice versa. There's a lot of similarities. I think the main difference in the agenda is, as we've all kind of concluded by this point, the UFO abductees, they're looking for very specific blood types and genetics. And it's more of a breeding, cloning, medical type of experience. For the astral realm, and not that you can't have experiences in the astral realm where you're being hurt in various ways, but it seems to me that the result of most people that come out of the sleep paralysis, the lifelong sleep paralysis astral abduction scenario, they become influencers and leaders. They become the spokespeople for the astral realm. We're the ones that are supposed to promote how awesome the new golden age is going to be. And we are going to relate all of the theosophical aspects of religion and philosophy. We're going to influence all the 7 sciences. Our astral understanding is going to rewrite history books, law books, medical books, philosophy books, religious books, literature, film, media, music. And so I think the reason why they pick creative, empathetic, intelligent, introverted types of people is they're looking for people with skills of oration and articulation. They're looking for spokespeople more than they're looking for biologics.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder, yeah, it's crazy to me. I wonder, who knows what we all know what the end game is here. I guess it's just kind of fascinating to me that they're going for a specific type, but it makes sense. The other thing too, that you had said earlier that I had never even thought of, which makes a ton of sense, was like the whole, what was the series, with Edward Cullen that you mentioned earlier?
Oh, Twilight.
Thank you. The whole Twilight thing and how the branding now, or the twist now to go after the kids is to make it, this cool thing instead of the torment that maybe our generation and older have experienced. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing there. So all right, well, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here and give you an opportunity, and I have ready pulled up for you, and I'm going to see if I can click this and get it to go, but I have already pulled up for you, and you should show up at the bottom here. All of us are at the bottom. I have pulled up Vicky's website. So if you guys want to find out more about Vicky, you can actually go over to her website, and it is VickiJoyAnderson.com. So you can see it there. May cover our face for a quick second or two, but that's all right. And you can find out more about her and the book that we have been talking about that she has written. They Only Come Out at Night, Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis. This has been a fascinating conversation today that I was curious to see where we would go, and it went more places than I could have ever imagined. Vicky, you were phenomenal today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys want to check her out, that is fantastic. We will also, when her episode actually comes out on the normal release, we will make sure that she actually has a tab on our website as well that we will affiliate link her book to Amazon, and you can get it that way. If you don't want to wait for that, you can actually head over to her website, VickiJoyAnderson.com, and pick up the book today. Vicky, you're awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good.
All
really
right.
good.
With that, we will bid you adieu until next time on The Foil. Take care.
Bye.